The first step toward building and understanding seventh chords is making sure you can build a triad. So if you want to review that, you can see the topic chords and triads. A seventh is a triad, which is a root, third above that, and a fifth above that root, with another third on top of it. That's the seventh. So it gets that name as it's a seventh. The interval is a seventh from the root. So it's stacked in thirds, a third, a fifth, and a seventh. Naming a seventh chord has two parts, similar to an interval, a scale, or a chord. There's the root name, which could be C7 or D7, but C or D is the root name. That's like the tonic of a chord or a scale. That's the main note. That's what the chord is built on. And then there's the quality of the chord. For example, there's diminished, minor, major seventh, augmented seventh. The quality of the seventh is determined by the other intervals above the root. In a common seventh chord, a third and a seventh above the root determine the quality. So, for example, here's the root of the chord. There's often a fifth above the root as well, but the third and the seventh, here's the third, and here's the seventh, those determine what the chord sounds like. Here's a minor third and a minor seventh. It's different from a major third and a major seventh. It's important to know the intervals quickly, since you have to be thinking quickly in thirds. A minor third, a major third, a perfect fifth, minor seventh, major seventh. You have to know those relatively quickly in order to be able to figure out what the seventh chords are, what the notes are in the seventh chord. Here's how some common seventh chords are built, from the most compact to the most open. A fully diminished chord we'll start with the root in C, and a fully diminished seventh has a minor third, a diminished fifth, so this would be E flat, then G flat, and then a diminished seventh. And because we have to stack them and think in thirds, we have C, E, G, and this note has to be named B of some kind, because that would be a third above G. So it's actually a B double flat in this case. So C, E flat, G flat, and B double flat make a fully diminished seventh chord built on a C. A half diminished chord starts out the same way, but the seventh is a little different. We start out on the root, we have a minor third, the diminished fifth, which makes it a diminished chord, but it's only half diminished because the seventh, we get just B flat this time. That's a half diminished seventh chord. A minor seventh is built with a minor third, a perfect fifth, and a minor seventh. That would be a C minor 7. Continuing to open up the intervals a little bit, if we start on a C and we have a major third, a perfect fifth, but a minor seventh, that's called a dominant seventh. Major third and a minor seventh. Sometimes this minor seventh in that case is called a dominant seventh. Opening it up the most, we have from C a major third, a perfect fifth, and a major seventh. A major third and a major seventh, that's just called a C major 7. You can take those patterns and transpose that to any starting note. So just for an example, we'll start on A. So from the most compact, we start with a fully diminished chord, A, C is a minor third, E flat would be the diminished fifth, and then G flat would be the diminished seventh. That's a fully diminished seventh built on an A. Half diminished opens it up a little bit. We start with the same diminished triad, and we open it up to a minor seventh. An A minor seventh, opening it up a little more, minor third, this time a perfect fifth, minor seventh. Now we have a dominant seventh. We make it a major third and a minor seventh. And finally, a fully major seventh. We have a major third, perfect fifth, and this time G sharp gives us our major seventh. We can add one more seventh chord called an augmented chord. It's not used as much, but if you also augment the fifth, A, C sharp, E sharp, G sharp, we get what's called an augmented seventh chord that has a major third, a major seventh, and an augmented fifth. Some common jazz seventh chords that are a little different from that, they're modified a little bit. So let's start with a major seventh, and you can flat the five. You get a major third, a diminished fifth, this would be C to E, G flat, and B. You could also have a minor seventh flat five, so you start by building a minor seven and flat the fifth. G flat instead of a G natural. That's actually the same as a half diminished chord. A minor seven flat five is the same as a half diminished. And then there's a chord called a minor major seventh. You start with a minor third interval, a perfect fifth, and a major seventh. So again, minor major seventh. You don't have to include all of the notes when you're building a seventh chord. A complete seventh chord has 4 notes. It's got the root, third, fifth, and seventh. But typically, a keyboard player playing jazz or a guitar player playing also typically in jazz will leave out a note or two. You can leave out the root of the chord if it's being played by a bass player. You can leave out the fifth. Typically, you leave out the major fifth. If the fifth is flatted, if it's diminished, or if it's augmented, then obviously that's an important part of the chord and you need to include it. But if it's a major, a perfect fifth above the root, you can typically leave that out. And acoustically, the fifth is implied. It's contained within the root or the bass note. So to hear this, it's almost the fifth is implied. And for that reason, it's easy to leave out. It also makes it easier to play. So guitarists and keyboardists can leave out any note of a seventh chord as long as it's covered somewhere else. So far, all of the seventh chords we've been building are in root position. If a different note is in the bass, that's called an inversion. So for more information on that, see the topic inversions.